The frozen rebellion of Aspen Ridge. Your snowmobile threatens our community's new green initiative. Gas-powered vehicles are being phased out, the 36-year-old HOA president declared, standing alone in the snow, confronting me as the white HOA-branded tow truck behind her hoisted my $15,000 machine into the air. I stood with arms crossed, my weathered face set in stone, feet planted firmly in front of my wooden cabin, watching in disbelief as they confiscated the vehicle I'd parked beside my porch for 10 winters. The same vehicle that provided 40% of my income. What she couldn't have known was that within 24 hours, that empty spot would be occupied by a 6-foot ice sculpture of me giving the middle finger to the HOA office. A frozen monument of defiance that would not only go viral with 2.7 million views, but spark a nationwide revolt against HOA tyranny. They took my snowmobile, so I replaced it with a giant ice sculpture of me flipping them off, and that was just the beginning. At 48, after 3 decades in construction, my mountain cabin represented everything I'd worked for. Aspen Ridge Estates seemed perfect when I bought in, established rules, reasonable fees, and neighbors who understood mountain living. My snowmobile wasn't a recreational toy but essential equipment for Sullivan Wilderness tours, taking photographers to remote locations inaccessible by road. The business provided 40% of my income and had operated without complaint for 10 winters. My Ski-Doo 850 parked beside my cedar porch, where emergency access was guaranteed. The community dynamic shifted when Diane Winters arrived, a corporate attorney from Chicago who purchased the community's largest property site unseen. She quickly orchestrated what older residents called a suburban coup. Within 6 months, she'd replaced 3 board members with friends from her previous HOA and began implementing aesthetic upgrades that contradicted Aspen Ridge's rustic character. These mountains deserve better than haphazard frontier styling, she announced at her first meeting as president. The declaration baffled residents who'd specifically chosen Aspen Ridge for its authentic mountain atmosphere. February 12th, 6 inches of fresh powder blanketed Aspen Ridge overnight. The temperature read 12 degrees Fahrenheit as I sipped coffee on my porch, reviewing routes for that afternoon's photography tour for clients, $1, $200 in revenue. At 7:17 a.m., a white tow truck with HOA emblazoned on its door crawled up my driveway, the flatbed empty, but the crane ready for action. Jim Reynolds, our 60-year-old maintenance manager, remained behind the wheel, while Diane Winters stepped out, a slender 36-year-old in a fitted navy coat and designer snow boots better suited for a Chicago fashion show than our mountain conditions. She marched toward my cabin, clipboard in hand, determination on her face, creating the exact confrontation scene captured in the thumbnail that would later go viral. "Mr. Sullivan," she called without climbing my steps, "we're addressing the vehicle situation today." I descended, boots crunching through fresh snow. "What vehicle situation?" "Your recreational equipment," she gestured toward my snowmobile with manicured fingers. "The board enacted our new Green Mountain Initiative last week. All gas-powered recreational vehicles are being phased out to reduce our community's carbon footprint. Green initiative for a snowmobile that's been here 10 years, that I use for my business?" She produced a document. Section 5, Paragraph 3 of our updated standards. All fossil fuel-powered recreational vehicles are prohibited in residential areas as part of Aspen Ridge's commitment to becoming the first carbon-neutral mountain community in the state. The standoff unfolded exactly as captured in what would become the viral thumbnail image. Me, a weathered 48-year-old in flannel and work pants, arms firmly crossed. Diane, the 36-year-old HOA president, gesturing emphatically against the backdrop of my snow-covered cabin with smoke curling from the chimney. "This machine is for my business, not recreation," I explained. "I have clients arriving at noon." Her expression hardened. "Business operations require electric alternatives under our new guidelines. No eco-conscious business would use fossil fuels in 2023. "Jim," she called without breaking eye contact, "proceed with removal." Behind the wheel, Jim hesitated, a 20-year resident who'd helped dig out my driveway last winter. He mouthed, "I'm sorry," before activating the hydraulic lift. The mechanism groaned as my $15,000 livelihood rose into the air, the red snowmobile swaying against the truck's stark white paint. "This is theft of property essential to my livelihood," I stated, voice deadly calm despite my internal rage. Diane's smile was triumphant. "It's environmental protection appeal at next month's meeting. If you want until then, your pollution machine remains impounded." As they pulled away, my snowmobile dangling from chains, she walked alongside momentarily, satisfaction evident in her expression. Little did she know she just created the perfect adversary, a mountain veteran with construction skills, community connections, and nothing left to lose. That afternoon, I stared at the vacant spot where my snowmobile should have been. My phone buzzed with desperate messages from clients who'd driven hours and were now stranded at our meeting point. $1, $200 in lost revenue today, my reputation in tatters, and next month's mortgage payment suddenly in jeopardy. In one morning, Diane hadn't just taken my vehicle, she'd threatened my entire livelihood and future in Aspen Ridge. I paced the wooden floors of my cabin, the same cabin my father had built with his own hands after retiring from the logging industry. The walls held 3 decades of mountain memories, photographs of wildlife captured during expeditions, antique snowshoes my grandfather had used, and the framed first dollar I'd earned when Sullivan Wilderness Tours launched 10 years ago. "Dad would have fought this," I muttered, touching the carved wooden mantel he'd installed above the fireplace. But he would have fought smart. While searching for legal recourse online, I discovered something that transformed my approach: the HOA bylaws. The actual governing documents, not Diane's emergency standards, contained explicit protection for business equipment and required 30-day notice periods for all new regulations. Section 12.4 stated unequivocally, no board policy affecting resident property may be enacted without a 30-day notice period and public comment session. Furthermore, Section 17.2 specified, equipment essential to licensed home-based businesses is exempt from recreational vehicle restrictions, provided safety standards are maintained. I printed the pages, highlighting the relevant sections with trembling hands. Diane's board hadn't just overstepped, they'd explicitly violated multiple binding provisions. The confiscation wasn't merely unfair, it was illegal under the HOA's own governing documents. This discovery coincided with a text from Betty Williams, our 70-year-old community historian. "Jack, this isn't the first time. Check your email." Betty had compiled documentation of 7 similar incidents since Diane's presidency began: garden structures removed, holiday decorations confiscated, even a memorial bench dedicated to a veteran relocated without consultation. Each enforcement action had targeted long-term residents, while newer properties with modernist designs and non-native landscaping received compliance grace periods. Betty's email included particularly troubling information, minutes from a private board meeting where Diane had stated her vision for Aspen Ridge's future. "Within 5 years, we can transform this rustic backwater into a premium alpine destination that will attract the right kind of residents." The right kind of residents, the phrase burned in my mind as I stared at the empty space where my snowmobile had stood. I called Frank Patterson, our former board president, who confirmed my suspicions. "Jack, this isn't about community standards, it's about community replacement. Property values go up, taxes increase, and suddenly the original residents can't afford to stay. I've seen it happen in 3 other mountain communities. There must be something in the bylaws to stop this," I insisted. "There is," Frank agreed, "but legal challenges take time, money, and organization. Meanwhile, they'll keep picking off residents one by one. What we need is something that forces everyone to see what's happening, something impossible to ignore." That evening, I sat on my porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in hues of orange and purple. The beauty of the landscape contrasted sharply with the ugliness of the situation. My neighbors to the left, the Hendersons, who'd lived in Aspen Ridge for 15 years, had received a citation about their traditional split-rail fence being inconsistent with alpine aesthetic guidelines. The Martinez family across the road had been ordered to remove the vintage tractor that had served as a community landmark for generations. This wasn't simply about my snowmobile anymore. This was about the soul of Aspen Ridge, about whether our community would remain true to its authentic mountain character or be transformed into another soulless luxury development with no connection to local history or lifestyle. As darkness fell, inspiration struck, not just resistance, but a statement so clear, so memorable, and so legally unassailable that it would force the community to confront what was happening. Something that would speak louder than legal documents, but remain within the boundaries of the law. Something impossible to ignore or dismiss. I remembered Mike Thornton, whose ice sculpture business in Aspen catered to celebrity clients and high-end resorts. During a wilderness photography expedition the previous year, I'd helped him scout remote locations for a high-profile installation that had subsequently earned his company national recognition and a feature in Architectural Digest. With renewed determination, I grabbed my phone and dialed his number, surprised when he answered on the first ring despite the late hour. "Mike, it's Jack Sullivan from Aspen Ridge." "Jack, great to hear from you. How's the photography business? Got any more amazing locations to show me?" I took a deep breath. "Actually, Mike, I need a favor. A big one. And it involves ice, a lot of it." "I'm intrigued already," he replied, the smile evident in his voice. "I need to create the most unforgettable ice sculpture Aspen Ridge has ever seen. Something that will make a statement impossible to ignore. Can you be here tomorrow with equipment for a 6-foot installation?" A moment of silence followed before Mike responded, "For you, Jack, I'll cancel my corporate clients." "What exactly did you have in mind?" As I described my vision in detail, the pose, the gesture, the inscription, his initial shock gave way to professional excitement. "That's not just a sculpture, Jack," he said with a hint of awe. "That's a revolution in frozen water. A statement for the ages. I'll bring my best carving team and the clearest Arctic-grade ice in Colorado. We'll create something they'll be talking about long after it melts." I smiled for the first time since the confrontation. "That's exactly what I'm counting on. Mike, it's time Aspen Ridge remembered what it stands for." Mike arrived at dawn with a refrigerated truck, 3 assistants, and Arctic-grade ice, dense, crystal clear, and spectacular when sunlight hits it, he promised. For 17 relentless hours, chainsaws roared and chisels flew. The ice took shape, my exact facial features, the unmistakable raised middle finger, even details that would become viral talking points, my mountain jacket, snow boots, and coffee mug matching the one I'd held during Diane's ambush. We mounted it on a granite base inscribed with, "This is my land. This is my answer. And no snowmobile, no problem. I'll stay frozen too." Solar-powered lights ensured the statement would be impossible to miss, day or night. As dawn broke, we positioned my frozen doppelganger exactly where my snowmobile had stood, 6 feet tall, perfectly visible from the main road and framed against my cabin for maximum impact. The morning sun transformed it from ice into something more, a luminous declaration of defiance that seemed to glow from within. Mike stepped back, grinning. "This isn't just protest art, it's a masterpiece of residential rebellion." Betty Williams discovered it first during her morning constitutional. Her laughter echoed across snow-covered terrain as she pulled out her phone to document what would become Aspen Ridge's most famous attraction. "Jack Sullivan," she called toward my porch, clutching her sides, "you magnificent frozen troublemaker." Word spread with remarkable speed through the community's text chains. Within 90 minutes, a steady procession of residents drove slowly past my property. Reactions split predictably, newer residents expressing shock, established community members offering thumbs up through car windows. Frank Patterson, our 72-year-old former board president, parked directly on the street for optimal viewing. "Now that," he announced loudly enough for all to hear, "is what I call proper mountain communication." By 10 a.m., local newspaper reporters arrived. By noon, regional television crews set up filming positions. The young reporter struggled to maintain professionalism during her live introduction. A unique property rights dispute has emerged in Aspen Ridge Estates, where one homeowner has responded to what he calls HOA overreach with an equally oversized statement. As cameras rolled, an unmistakable sound pierced the scene, Diane's luxury SUV accelerating up the street. Her performance for the assembled media exceeded theatrical expectations. "This is outrageous," she declared, storming toward my property line where I calmly sipped coffee. "This obscene display violates every standard of community decency." The cameras captured our exchange in its entirety. "I don't recall any HOA regulations about ice sculptures," I replied evenly. "I reviewed the bylaws quite thoroughly yesterday. It's vulgar. It's offensive. So is illegally confiscating property essential to my livelihood without proper notice, due process, or adherence to the bylaws you're sworn to uphold." Her attempt to cover the sculpture with an emergency tarp from her vehicle created additional viral content as wind repeatedly thwarted her efforts. The image of the HOA president struggling with billowing fabric against the impassive frozen figure became the defining visual of the confrontation. "You'll hear from Mr. Sullivan. The HOA has resources and authority you can't imagine." The numbers exploded. Midnight, 75,000 views. Breakfast, 850,000 views. Dinner, 2.1 million views. 48 hours, 7.8 million views, and hashtag HOA middle finger trending nationally. Fox News called first, followed by 3 radio shows. Tucker Carlson's producer left 3 messages. "You're the symbol America needed," one host told me on air. "The working man standing up to bureaucratic tyranny." Property rights attorneys offered free representation. Veterans groups pledged support. 3 ice sculpture businesses offered partnerships. A merchandising company proposed Freedom Finger t-shirts with my silhouette. Comments flooded in by the thousands. "This is the most beautiful middle finger to authority I've ever seen. You're fighting for every American who's had government overreach destroy their livelihood." Even liberals and conservatives agree this man is a legend. The unexpected tourism impact transformed our quiet mountain community. Cars with license plates from 5 surrounding states lined our streets. Visitors trudged through snow for selfies with my frozen alter ego. Local businesses experienced unprecedented winter revenue. Diane's counteroffensive proved catastrophically misjudged. Each attempt to reassert control amplified public interest. When she sent maintenance workers to cover the sculpture, anonymous community members removed the coverings within hours. When she installed temporary privacy fencing, it mysteriously disappeared overnight. Her most disastrous miscalculation occurred when she attempted to use a community snowblower to damage the sculpture. 3 residents recorded the attempt on phones, and her retreat when confronted became another viral moment, captioned, "HOA President Attempts Art Destruction, Retreats When Caught." Throughout this period, the sculpture remained immaculate. I never confirmed rumors that I performed nightly maintenance, restoring any minor melting or damage, which fostered community mythology about collective guardianship of the frozen protest. On day 6, an unforeseen opportunity materialized that changed the conflict's trajectory. A black SUV with production company logos parked near my cabin. A professional team emerged, led by an executive producer for American Homeowners, cable television's highest-rated property rights series. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm Robert Harrington, executive producer. Your situation has garnered significant attention within our demographic." He proposed a documentary feature with comprehensive coverage: the snowmobile confiscation, sculpture creation, community impact, and eventual resolution. The compensation offer exceeded my annual business income. We'd need to film reenactments, interview community members, and naturally capture the HOA perspective as well. Before I could respond, a mechanical sound interrupted our conversation, the maintenance truck approaching with a trailer. On that trailer sat my snowmobile, apparently untouched. Jim parked and approached with evident discomfort, extending an envelope from the board. "Jack, not from Diane." The letter inside contained a formal apology signed by 4 board members, everyone except Diane. It acknowledged that proper procedures hadn't been followed, that my snowmobile qualified for business exemption under Section 17.2, and expressed sincere regret for any economic impact caused by this procedural oversight. As Jim unloaded my snowmobile into its rightful place, the television producer observed with professional disappointment. The conflict resolution he'd hoped to document was materializing prematurely. "I assume this means you'll be removing the sculpture?" he inquired. My response reflected genuine evolution in my perspective. "Eventually, winter ends, Mr. Harrington. Ice melts. But community memory, that endures longer than any frozen water." The board's unexpected capitulation ignited community curiosity. What had forced this dramatic reversal? The answer emerged through conversations at Aspen Ridge's general store, diner, and informal gathering spaces. Three converging forces had created irresistible pressure. First, Frank Patterson had engaged his son, a property rights attorney, who documented multiple bylaw violations in Diane's enforcement actions. The potential liability exceeded the HOA's insurance coverage. Second, local business owners experiencing unprecedented revenue from sculpture tourism had leveraged commercial influence with board members who relied on their services. Most significantly, a petition for emergency leadership review had gathered signatures from 83% of homeowners in just 5 days, an unprecedented community consensus. The resulting emergency board meeting exceeded attendance records in Aspen Ridge history. The community center overflowed as residents arrived with lawn chairs and thermoses. The recorded proceedings, live-streamed by an enterprising teenager, would later be described as better than scripted television. Diane attempted to maintain procedural control. "This meeting will address the disruptive display at the Sullivan residence and appropriate enforcement responses." Frank Patterson's commanding voice interrupted. "Point of order, Madam President. Before secondary matters, we must address demonstrated violations of HOA bylaws by current leadership and the resulting community liability." What followed was 3 hours of unprecedented community dialogue as residents articulated specific grievances accumulated during Diane's brief but contentious tenure. The previously silent majority found collective voice in a catharsis that transformed community power dynamics permanently. Betty Williams, a 70-year-old Vietnam War widow, slowly rose from her chair, refusing help despite her arthritis, leaning on a wooden cane her late husband had carved. She silenced the room. "My generation built America on respect for a man's property and hard work. Some people mistake an HOA for a weapon to control neighbors. It's not. It's a shield to protect our community while respecting each person's right to live as they see fit on their own damn land. We've forgotten that, and it stops today." The vote for leadership change was decisive. Diane was removed as president with immediate effect. Frank Patterson accepted temporary reinstatement until formal elections could be conducted. The board's first unanimous decision allocated resources for Aspen Ridge Unity Day, a community celebration explicitly designed to heal recent divisions. 1 week later, as preparations for Unity Day proceeded, an unanticipated visitor arrived at my door. Diane stood alone on my porch, visibly uncomfortable but determined. "I came to apologize," she began, the words evidently challenging her pride. "I moved here because I genuinely believed in building a special community in these mountains. But somewhere along the way, I confused control with improvement." Her vulnerability seemed authentic as she continued, "For what it's worth, I respect what you did, not the specific gesture," she clarified with the hint of a smile, "but standing firmly for your principles. My father was similar, stubborn, principled to a fault. We didn't speak for years because neither of us would yield ground." Before departing, she extended an envelope containing a personal check covering income lost from the canceled tours during my snowmobile's absence. "This isn't from the HOA," she specified. "It's from me." That evening, after considerable reflection, I made a decision that surprised my supporters. With Mike's assistance, I modified the ice sculpture, carefully removing the raised middle finger and replacing it with an open hand in the universal stop gesture, still firm, still definitive, but transforming the message from anger to principled boundary setting. The modified sculpture generated renewed interest, with community members discussing the symbolism of transformation and reconciliation. It remained standing through 3 additional snowstorms, gradually yielding to natural melting as spring approached. The evolving form became a visual metaphor for community healing, maintaining clear boundaries while allowing for renewal. Spring arrived gradually in Aspen Ridge. The sculpture returned to water, nourishing wildflowers around my cabin's perimeter, but its impact crystallized into permanent community change through a series of remarkable developments no one could have anticipated. First, my ice sculpture inspired a wave of creative expressions throughout Aspen Ridge. The Martinez family, facing removal of their vintage tractor, surrounded it with a garden of native plants and a sign reading, "Mountain Heritage, Not Removable." The Hendersons transformed their contested split-rail fence into a community art project, with each rail painted by a different resident depicting their vision of mountain life. These installations, all carefully designed to comply with HOA regulations while making clear statements, turned Aspen Ridge into an unexpected tourist destination. Local media dubbed it the Frozen Revolution, as HOA communities across 3 states reported similar creative protests against overreaching regulations. My phone rang constantly with interview requests, culminating in a feature on the national morning show, American Communities Today, where the host asked, "Is this the beginning of a new relationship between homeowners and HOAs nationwide?" The economic impact proved equally significant. Tourism increased 37% as visitors came to see the community that had fought back with art. Local businesses thrived, with the general store selling, ice protest merchandise, and the diner offering a First Amendment frost milkshake. Property values rose, not through exclusion as Diane had planned, but through authentic celebration of mountain character. Most importantly, the HOA bylaws underwent comprehensive revision with unprecedented resident participation. The amended documents included strengthened property rights protections, transparent enforcement procedures, and explicit recognition of home-based businesses common in mountain communities. Board meetings transformed from sparsely attended formalities to engaged community forums with record participation. Decisions previously made through procedural technicalities now required genuine community consensus. The quarterly meetings became community events with potluck dinners beforehand and bonfires afterward, restoring the neighborly spirit that had defined Aspen Ridge's founding. The concept of community character evolved from aesthetic uniformity to celebration of authentic mountain living, embracing the diversity of buildings, vehicles, and lifestyles that attracted residents to Aspen Ridge initially. New architectural guidelines specifically protected heritage elements, including traditional cabins, functional equipment, and native landscaping. Betty Williams, elected HOA president at 70, implemented leadership principles reflecting decades of community experience. Rules exist to protect community values, not to impose artificial standards. Our governing principle is simple: if it doesn't actively harm your neighbor, we probably don't need to regulate it. Perhaps most surprisingly, Diane Winters remained in the community, eventually finding her place as chair of the Sustainable Development Committee, where her organizational skills proved valuable when properly channeled. "I still believe in building a special community," she admitted during a reconciliation dinner at my cabin, "but I've learned that special doesn't mean standardized." The following winter, as I parked my snowmobile in its historical location beside my porch, Betty presented a small bronze plaque. We mounted it on a natural stone where the ice sculpture had stood, with residents from throughout Aspen Ridge gathering for the informal ceremony. The inscription read, "On this spot in 2023, a community remembered that rules without reason become tyranny and that neighbors without conversation become strangers." As snow began falling during the dedication, Frank Patterson raised a toast to the sculpture that melted but warmed our community in the process. The sculpture melted with spring's arrival, but its impact was permanent. Today, clients on my wilderness tours still ask about the middle finger incident. I show them a photo that went viral with over 3 million views and point to Aspen Ridge's transformed community, where my business now thrives unrestricted and property rights are sacred. The HOA meeting room now displays just 3 words carved in wood: communication before confrontation. And Diane? She still lives here, but now she's the one following our rules.